with us to discuss how mental health and substance abuse issues were affecting our community and what possibly could be done legislatively to address these issues. Shortly after that meeting, I invited the senator to visit the Camp Verde jail, where I introduced her to Chief Deputy Dave Rhodes and Jail Commander Captain Jeff Noonan. What was discussed was how, one sec. No. Okay. What was discussed was how the criminalization of mental illness and substance abuse were not being tackled in a way that made our community safer or reduced recidivism, therefore not preventing crime, as well as the financial burden to the county was exorbitant. Senator Allen returned to the Senate last session and got to work busily introducing some important legislation. This summit is about the Stepping Up initiative, and I can tell you, Senator Allen has certainly stepped up her game. It is my privilege and with gratitude that I introduce State Senator Sylvia Allen.
Gentlemen, I really want you to know that I'm very happy to be here to talk about this important issue, and I thank Audrey so much for inviting me to speak today. You know, until a subject becomes personal to you, an issue becomes personal to you, sometimes you just don't, you don't really get involved, you don't understand it. I want to share with you 3 stories of why I started becoming interested in doing something about this issue. The first has to do with my son-in-law, who in '64 was diagnosed with leukemia and went through 7 long years of battling. He had a stem cell transplant which did not work and then caused him many numerous health problems, which is what he passed away from. No, this was a horrendous time for my daughter and my 5 grandchildren. But my daughter will tell you the 3 to 4 months out of that 7 years where he developed, out of the blue, had a mental breakdown and became mentally ill. That was the worst time of that whole 7 years, she will tell you, in trying to deal with what happened. His brothers came. They had gone on a vacation when it just became apparent that it was becoming worse, and he was starting to really scare her and the children. And his 2 brothers came to take him to the hospital, and Lauren refused to be admitted. And he said, I don't want to be admitted. And his brothers argued with him to try to get him to, because as you know, he has to self-admit. He said, just take me to my mother's and I'll have her watch me. And my daughter asked him, Lauren, you know you needed help. Why would you not do that? And he said, Marnie, I didn't want it on my health records that I was crazy. He said, I don't want that stigma. And he was feeling so guilty about what he was going through that he didn't want it on his health record. Now, his health record was full of all these things. He wasn't ashamed to have on his health record that he was going through cancer, and that he was, and all the things that had happened to him during this process. He wasn't ashamed of that. But he could not bear to think about what was going on with him mentally. And that's part of the problem with mental illness, is that it's not understood and it's frightening, and it was so frightening to my daughter. Thankfully, in about 3 to 4 months, he was able to resolve the issues. The other story is within my extended family. My niece got involved with drugs when she was about 15. She got a hold of some really bad LSD that really mentally harmed her brain. And the whole process of what my family went through in this particular situation on that, when she turned 18, then it was like my sister could no longer have any, she didn't have access to the records, she wasn't involved anymore because now she was 18. And that was a problem that really affected my sister. And the miracle with my niece, the doctors had said she is never going to recover and she's going to be very ill her whole life. But there was a miracle with her, and she's a very functioning adult now and very self-sufficient and has been able to work through those problems. The last situation that was very, very difficult for my extended family was this young man at 22 developed schizophrenia. He had never used drugs, but when he was 22, he started developing this mental illness. Again, his family was trying to find a way to help him, and they went to families, and these three stories, families don't know where to go to get help. They don't know what kind of help's out there, and they don't understand the laws. They don't know that they can go get a court order. They don't. How do you maneuver the court system? How do you get somebody that's mentally sick who doesn't realize they're sick to be willing to be self-admitted? How do you maneuver all of this? And families don't know what to do, and they didn't know what to do to help this young man. They tried to get him admitted, but he would not self-admit. And he ended up out on the street for over a year. They had no idea where he was at. He was homeless out on the streets. He was picked up in Tucson at the county jail. And this is why I became so interested in what Yavapai was doing. Because if it wasn't for the county jail in Tucson, Pima County's program, where they do this assessment, they're the ones that then called the family and said, you've got a very sick family member here. And they started helping him with his mental illness. That's how they got help, was at Pima County Jail. The story about Barton does not end well because, again, family doesn't know how to get the help they need to get on somebody that is very ill. The tragic story with him is he had no hope in trying to understand. He just was not getting the counseling. He wasn't getting the type of help that he needed. And this young man, just beautiful young man, so talented, so gifted, ended up taking his own life. So this is about individuals. It's about people. It's about families. It's about people who have personalities and dreams and find themselves in a situation where they become ill in a different way. We know how to treat cancer. We know as a family how to support somebody who is ill with heart disease or diabetes. But we don't know how to support family members, our friends, our people who have mental illness. As my son-in-law said, it's a stigma, and I don't want people to think I'm crazy. And it just broke my heart to think, here he's going through all of this trial and tribulation, and that was the one thing he was worried about. And so we just don't have the understanding. There needs to be more education on that. As a policymaker, what can I do on a state level? Ladies and gentlemen, everything's so complicated. Government is just intertwined, and every issue you want to try to help with is so hard to figure out really what can you do. I loved when I went to the jail at Yavapai County because I want to bring things down to the local level where it's easier for people to get the help, where it's down locally where they're living and where families are there to be supported. And so it is important to figure out how do we get the money to these down to the local level. The other thing I've realized in being involved in government, we don't have enough money to do everything we need to do. The Arizona budget, the whole Arizona budget is like $30 billion, but the general fund is only about 10. That's the only part legislators deal with. The other 2/3 is non-touchable money that is not available to the general fund. So here we are trying to fund everything: education, health care, the agencies, roads, prisons, all trying to figure out where do we get enough money to make all of these critical issues that are important to the people and to our state, how do we fund it? I take taxpayers' dollars as sacred, ladies and gentlemen. We should not look at other people's money as something we can just be very wasteful with. It comes from our citizens who give it as law-abiding citizens so we can have government. Our senior citizens who are on fixed incomes, young married couples that are just starting out, families that are struggling. It is important that we don't waste government money in any way, that we take it and we utilize it. I've come to find out there's all kinds of pots of money sitting here and there and everywhere within state government, believe it or not. Found that out when we were in the $3 billion deficit, and the state was on the verge of bankruptcy. We didn't have enough money coming in every day to pay the warrants because we hit that recession and we had so overspent that we found ourselves trying to figure out where do we go get $3 billion. Well, they raided every fund possible, and that's how you found out there's all these little pots of money sitting out there. So now when I'm trying to look for money to fund things that are very important, we start looking for little pots of monies that are sitting out there and figuring out, why are they sitting there? Why are they not being used? They were appropriated for a purpose. Why on earth are they just sitting there? Why isn't it being used for the purpose in which we appropriated it? I had a lobbyist come to my office yesterday. We had appropriated money to law enforcement to buy these virtual demonstrating virtual machines that would help law enforcement in training. They're phenomenal. I don't know if any of you law enforcement out there have had a chance to see this new technology that we appropriated about $2 million. Found out that one of these monitors is sitting up north, still in its box, nobody using it. We're talking about a $300,000 monitor. We got to be sure if we appropriate money on a state level that it gets to where we want it to go to solve the problem we're wanting to solve, and that we don't waste this money. And so that's always my consideration when I'm looking at legislation that's going to have to take more money to be able to get it off the ground. We passed this last session, I was a co-signer on 1278. And it is to, when the offender must admit to their criminal, okay, this is about if they have a drug addiction problem, the offender admits to their problem and they agree to make full restitution to all victims as long as they have not done a felony that's violent, they didn't commit a violent crime. Then the person goes into the treatment and they can have their charges dismissed. And that's how we can, this is a bill to help keep people out of prison. But they have to go through this drug treatment. What we also did in this bill, and it's going to go down to the 14 small counties. That's where this money's going, $2.7 million. It's going to the county attorney's office through the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission. They're the pass-through agency. The money goes down to the county attorneys. So county attorneys, I hope you understand you've got this money coming and that you use it for what it needs to be used for. So it directs the appropriation of the 14 smallest Arizona counties. It provides that the intervention programs can include cognitive behavioral therapy. I was able to get Senator Smith to include in that these counties can use this money to help with mental health therapy. So you know this money's coming, counties. Please make sure it gets to where we're wanting it to go so that we are successful in these programs and that we can help these people that need that help. So some of that money can be used for this mental health therapy. Also, the legislation that I started working on last session but ran into the problem of the money. The state is growing about 3% since the recession. Basically what that means is that we're just holding on. However, we have about 3% more dollars every budget. It took us from 2009 to 2014 to actually get our budget balanced to where we were not spending more than what was coming in. It took a long time to get out of that hole that had been created from the deficit. So the state does not want to spend more money than what it's bringing in, and that's why it's so important that every penny that we get, we are very careful with it. So when the bill that I've already opened the folder again. I'm working with, and any of you in here that would like to work with me on this bill, please call my office, and I will include you in the stakeholders meeting. I've got Yavapai County that's helping me, and I want help from all of you with this. What this is about is to try to increase, I'm hitting the computer, I think. Each county jail will be directed to establish best practices for diversion program for seriously mentally ill inmates as they are processed in the jail. If there is a misdemeanor, the inmate has to be processed immediately because they're not held very long in the facility. If they're willing to go into the diversion program and to have treatment, then charges can be dropped on the misdemeanor. The thing is that Officer Rhodes explained is how they start out, it goes back to this young man I was talking about earlier who's living out on the streets. When they're sick like that, they end up doing things that might just be a misdemeanor. Maybe they're out trespassing, and they get called, the officer gets called, and they get brought in for trespass. But it starts building. By the time he hit Pima, he had stolen a car. But he insisted, no, that's my car. I bought it. So now he's on a felony charge, right? So if you could catch them at the very beginning and get them the treatment before they progress to a felony charge, then we can keep them we can get them back to health and whatever their situation is. What we're praying for is a miracle for every individual, that they can get back their life, get back to a healthy place so they can become self-sufficient. And we want to give them that hope that everybody can get there, if at all possible, with the right treatment, the right counseling, the right family support. So this is coming, I'm going to try to come up with state money so that counties can apply for a grant that will help them develop a program. We want every county to have a program. And from what we heard earlier, all the step-up program, all of our counties have signed on. And I was a supervisor for 2 years before I went back to the Senate. I'm very excited that the counties are participating in this, because this is where I think we need to go. We need to go as local as possible, get the money down to the local level as much as possible. So funding will be through grants that each county can apply for if they're willing to participate in the program. Now, one place where there's some pot of money is in the medical marijuana. They had built up that fund that's for the fees that are paid by the dispensary, and then the DHS has to go inspect and all the bookkeeping and that. So there were fees that had to be paid. Well, there's so much money coming in that they're not spending it all. So now there's $39 million sitting there. And we could use part of that money to help the counties with these programs, could we not? We need to, so I'm going to be working on that. As I'm saying, I'm looking for money figure out how to fund this piece of legislation so that we can that's my hope, is that every county will have a program to help to assess these individuals as they come into the county jail, get them quickly, right at the very beginning, whether it's a misdemeanor, whether it's a felony, and figure out then from that step forward. So that is what I'm working on. The other things is I was sharing those 3 stories with you. Over and over they stress there's got to be a way to change the process where families can be more involved, and where there's got to be an easier way if you know you have a very sick family member to see if you could get them evaluated in a 24-hour or 72-hour situation where you can get that to happen. Now I know they have to be willing to self-admit, because you don't want abuse, you don't want to take anybody's civil rights away. But if you heard the story about this young man and what this family went through at the very beginning, and then how that story ended, you can see that they're desperate for changing some of these policies of how we handle these situations. And so I think they need to be looked at. So as a policymaker on a state level, maybe we need to have stakeholder meetings to look at all these situations, but more importantly, we need to figure out how families can more easily know where to go to get the help that they need. Because that was, the other was the mother, suddenly she'd been very involved in her daughter's treatment, and then when she turned 18, it was like the door was just shut. Now she couldn't have access to her records. You know, they couldn't talk to her unless the daughter wanted to. It was just, became a mess. Those kinds of things need to be looked at, I think, if you want to keep families there supporting their family members. Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness. The other area we need to start working on, ladies and gentlemen, is the homeless, the mentally ill homeless out on the street. Down at the Capitol, the homeless are everywhere down there. The story about the young man, his family, once a year on his birthday, get together with friends, and they bring together all kinds of, they bring water and food bars and toothbrushes, and they make these little kits. And I've participated with them. And then you're to take those kits, and when you see a homeless person, you give it to them. And the little note that this young man left, excuse me, he talked about when he was homeless. And so he said, these are the things you need to put in the sack. And one was socks. How many homeless people do you see that don't have socks? And so they do that, and then they go out and they find somebody to give that to. So that's the next step, ladies and gentlemen. We got to figure out how we get the mentally ill off the streets. I've seen some such sad things down there of individuals who are mentally ill. Not everybody homeless is, but the vast majority of them are. And that needs to be something we need to figure out, how we do that. I want you to know the world is run by those who show up. And you showed up today, and you're making a difference. Everything we do ripples out and affects everyone out there. And we can't save everyone. You know the story of the little girl that was picking up the stars, what do they call the little starfish, thank you, and throwing them back in. And there were hundreds out on the beach. Well, you can't save all of these. It isn't going to matter, just throwing one back. And she says, well, it matters to this one. And so maybe we can't save everyone, but we can save someone. And it will matter to them, and it matters to their family, and it matters to those who love them. And so remember that as you're working on these programs, you can get lost into it and not remember why you're doing it. It's for those individual people out there who need someone to advocate for them and to help them. And that's why you're doing it. That's why you showed up today. And so I want to applaud you for the work that you do, because what we do on the state level, again, like I said, we pass something, we appropriate money. After that, we don't know what happens to it. Does it really get to the people we want it to get to? Is it really solving the problem we're trying to solve? That's up to all of you, all of you down on the ground doing the actual work. You're now responsible to be sure it gets to the people we're trying to reach. I appreciate being here today, and thank you very much for what you do, and keep up the good work, because there's a lot of work to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Allen. Wasn't that tremendous? And thank you, Yavapai County Sheriff's Office, for taking the steps to work with Senator Allen. I've never been so excited about seeing so much collaboration as long as I've been doing this. Not as long as you all, I know, but just tremendous remarks, Senator Allen. We'll be talking about it for a long time. It reminds me of when we started, Dr. Noggle. Where's Dawn Noggle? Is she in here? Telling me, here it comes again, Dawn. When I'd say, it's a really big problem, and, we're just a few folks, and do you really think we can do much? And Dr. Noggle looked at me right in the eye and said, but Mary Lou, if you help one person, you've made a difference. And that was it. I mean, that's just really it, and that's what Senator Allen reminded us all of today, so it's just critical.